So, good morning everybody. Welcome to today's workshop. Today is Level 3 Anatomy and Physiology Revision workshop, and it's called 4 Golden Nuggets to Pass First Time. So this workshop is all about kind of giving you a good level of confidence so that you can pass your anatomy and physiology exam first time, but it's also about giving you some 4 real clear golden nuggets so that you can really take away some really great value from today and actually help you along your revision. I'm Hayley, and we're obviously doing this workshop as part of parallel coaching today so that you can kind of get a little bit more out of your A&P revision. Looking at who's already logged onto this live webinar, we've got a few names that I recognise, which is fantastic. A few of you that are on our current PT course, and a few names that I don't recognise, which is just as fantastic. So welcome to everybody, and for sort of delaying your start to your bank holiday Monday in relation to getting out in the not so sunshiny weather, hey? So the main thing for those of you listening live, if you want to just pop a little comment, if you've got any questions that you want to ask or that you want me to answer throughout this workshop, then you literally just pop a little comment in the chat box, and that gives me a chance to be able to answer those throughout the duration of the webinar. If I can't get to your answer to your questions throughout the webinar, then there's a question and answers bit at the end, so I'll make sure that I include it. If for any reason you can't hear me properly or anything like that, then make sure that you just pop a little comment in that comments box and we can go from there. There will be opportunities for you to answer. We've got 6 mock questions throughout today, so you're going to have opportunity to practice these mock questions and go through the answers. And I've purposefully chosen areas that people generally tend to struggle on when they hit level 3. Now, just also that I notice a couple of names on the list here, a couple of names of people here of different abilities. Some of you are at level 2, some of you are still getting started. I really just want to highlight that this is a level 3 sort of golden nugget top up. So it's really based for people that are working towards their level 3 exam, because I'm going to literally just give you some golden nuggets which will be based on be built on the foundation you should have already built up with some of your revision already. So if, for example, you are just at level 2 or you're just working towards a lower level at the moment, don't worry if some of this is slightly over your head, or if you'd rather leave it today and then store your recording that I will send you, then that's absolutely fine as well. But just bear in mind that this is designed for level 3. That's fine. Welcome everybody. So we're ready to kick off, I believe, for today, which is fantastic. So the plan in today's workshop is I'm hoping to only keep you here for about 60 to maybe 75 minutes or so. Don't want to hold you on too long on a bank holiday Monday. So first things is that I want you to kind of understand what you need to expect on your level 3 A&P exam. We're going to talk about 4 golden nuggets that will help you pass first time. We're going to talk about how you can try out practice questions, and as I said a moment ago, we got 6 of those for you to practice on various topics. And then it's all about you feeling confident. That's my main priority today, is that you guys feel confident on your exam day and that you kind of have a little bit of confidence in yourself, because if you go in there with full confidence, then you're more likely to do better in your exam, regardless of how much knowledge you've crammed into your brain as well. So confidence really is key to your success. As part of all of this today, we are going to go through in some good detail, so it's really important that you stay as concentrated as you possibly can. So any distractions that you've got kind of hanging around, try and close the door to them as much as you possibly can. So find a little place where you can kind of be on your own whilst you're studying for this today. Make sure you've got your notepad out, etc. And in relation to social media, if you could check in this morning, that would be fantastic. So go to our Facebook page and just check into parallel coaching today. Say you're listening to your A&P webinar. That would be fantastic. Let everybody know what you're up to. But once you've done that, if you could close down all of your notifications of all of your social media, that will stop that tendency to want to drift towards those things that people are up to on social media and checking in and finding out what people are up to. So instead, close down your social media, switch off all distractions, and just be fully 100% kind of here and on it today as best you can. And that will ensure that you can be as successful as possible for your exam. So I'm 100% here. You've got my attention for a good hour today, and yeah, if you give your full attention as well, then I guarantee you'll get the most out of it you possibly can. When we get towards the end of today's workshop, I've got an offer for those of you that aren't already part of our Revision Mastery series, so a particular offer. Those of you that are on our PT course, you won't need this, you already have it. So those of you that are learners with us already, you already have this, so please don't worry about that offer. Those of you that I don't know and that haven't already gone forwards for the Revision Mastery, then we've got a specific offer at the very end of today's workshop. So, as I said before, those of you that are here live with us, make sure you pop in any questions you have throughout and I'll answer them as we go. So, let's get kind of stuck into the meat and bones of this, and this is kind of what to expect on your exam. Now, we're talking about level 3, so I'm guessing you guys have all gone through a level 2 version of an exam. You kind of already know what to expect. You know how they're structured. You know that all of the questions that you get on your exam are going to be multiple choice, and usually they're A to D. So these are based on the active IQ outlay for these. So 40 questions, and you need 28 correct in order to pass, which is 70%. Now, we base all of this structure on the active IQ guidelines. However, this is the same for most awarding bodies. So, for example, CYQ will be exactly the same as well. So it's about making sure that this aligns with whatever awarding body that you're studying with. However, check these against what your exam actually is. If it's active IQ and CYQ, these are 100% there. So 40 questions, you need 70% in order to pass, and they're all multiple choice questions with answers A to D. All you've got to do is select one answer. There are 7 modules within your exam. You've got heart and circulatory, musculoskeletal, muscle names and locations, posture and core stability, nervous system, endocrine and energy systems. Now, throughout all of those, you can guarantee there'll be about 3 to 8 questions on each section. So some of them will have a little bit more questions, some of them will have a little bit less questions, but it's about making sure that you've structured out your revision process and your learning process to make sure you're not missing one of these out entirely, because that could mean a real difference between whether you pass or refer. And what we're actually looking for is for you to pass first time. That's our aim. If you guys are joining us having already done one exam and it's not been successful, then the fact that you're here right now taking that extra step to pass is fantastic, and that's what it's all about. So you're actually doing the work to make sure that you understand and you have a good strategy, and that you understand all 7 modules within moving forwards for your A&P exam. So that's what you can expect on your exam. And what we're going to look into today is, rather than go through all of these 7 modules, because you're going to have me here for a long period of time. If I do all of these in all detail, you're going to probably have like 16 hours of me talking to you, and I'm sure you don't want that this morning. So instead, we're going to go through 4 golden nuggets. Now, I've chosen these really carefully based on the questions that we hear from our learners, from people that are on our revision course with us as well, but also it's questions that come up time and time again in the exam that people generally still have a little bit foggy on. Quite often these are the parts that are a bit of a jump up from level 2, and there just seems to be a couple of little gaps in some learning. So these are the 4 areas we're going to focus on. First one is atherosclerosis and blood pressures, and that's part of the heart and circulatory section. Then we're going to focus on planes and axis of movement. This is the biggie. This is the one that people always ask me about. So we're definitely in here for you guys. Then we've also got joint and muscle actions is going to go in here. And this is in relation to like concentric and eccentric movement. That one's popped in. And then the final one we're going to do is what is ATP. So it's about understanding these particular 4 sections today. And I'm going to go in depth in these 4 areas. And we're going to have 6 multiple choice questions spread across those 4 as well, which will allow you to practice and check your understanding. So those of you that are listening live, how does that sound? Any feedback on what we're talking about throughout all of this is fantastic. Use your chat box. It's supposed to be interactive, so please do keep in contact with me throughout all of this. Let us know how it's sounding. Fantastic. Good stuff, guys. Right, okay, let's move on and get started straight away. So, starting off with atherosclerosis and blood pressures. Now, the reason why I chose this one in particular for today's webinar is because I've seen a couple of questions come up in relation to the classifications of blood pressures, and it can be easy to kind of get your tongue-tied a little bit and your wires crossed. So it's nice to make sure that we've kind of laid this one straight out. We've noticed it has been popping up in all the papers. You can kind of guarantee there will be a question on blood pressure classifications. So let's make sure this is kind of covered. Now, when it also talks about blood pressures, it's talking about a condition called atherosclerosis. Now, nice long word for us to remember. Really kind of pay attention on here because they also talk about a second condition called arteriosclerosis. Now, atherosclerosis is the build-up of atheroma on the inside of the artery. Now, atheroma are these plaques. So if you look down here on the bottom right, you can see that there's literally plaques building up on the inside of this person's arteries, coronary arteries in their heart. Now, that plaque build-up is called atheroma, and then as that builds up and builds up and builds up, the condition is called atherosclerosis. How are you guys holding up? Because that's wading straight in for our workshop today. Good. Okay, fab. So atherosclerosis is the condition whereby those plaques build up. If you ever see the word arteriosclerosis, that's where that is developed to the point that the arteries lose their elasticity, so they become stiff. So they're kind of difference between those two. Now, the reason why we need to be aware of atherosclerosis is that it stops the circulation happening naturally around the heart, coronary arteries in particular, but this can affect all around the body. So when we're talking about atherosclerosis, we're saying that our client is basically having coronary heart disease. They're in a place whereby their circulation is massively affected around their heart. Now, we know that these coronary arteries, you can see them on that lovely picture up here on the top left, we know that the coronary arteries serve blood to the heart muscle itself. So if we end up with a blockage or with a restriction, then we know that the circulation is going to be restricted to that area of the heart. Now, if it is just a partial blockage, that will appear like angina, which will be pains in the chest when they have more exertion. That's a condition. Whereas if there is a little bit of plaque that gets sort of knocked off from all of this plaque lining up and it starts to float downstream and get stuck in these small little gaps, then that clot will stop the blood flow entirely, and then that area that is served by that blood flow will totally die off, and that's what we class as a heart attack. So this increase of atherosclerosis and coronary heart disease is what's causing heart attacks. Now, just as a side note, that same clot effect can happen in the brain, and if that happens, that's a stroke. So the same effect for a heart attack can happen in the brain, and that's classed as a stroke, whereby part of that brain dies off. So you've got all this information in relation to atherosclerosis, coronary heart disease. You know that the plaques are building up. That's going to cause problems regardless, okay? So we know that also that if that artery is now going from being sort of a size of, if you actually create an OK sign with your hands, pop your index finger and your thumb together. If you take that and say that's your artery width, now imagine there's lots of gunk inside that. You may as well be closing that to make a smaller circle. And that's what's happening when somebody's got this atherosclerosis. They actually have less space for their blood to flow through. If there's less space for their blood to flow through, their blood pressure, same amount of liquid in a smaller space, is going to increase the pressure, so blood pressure goes up. So we've kind of got to map in the differences of what that means for blood pressure. So that's one of the main causes for why blood pressure will go up. Now, we've got a name for high blood pressure. We call it hypertension. So take the word tension, add in hyper, which means over the top, so increased amounts of, then you've got risks of hypertension. So the risks of hypertension are cardiovascular disease, heart attack, stroke, and kidney dysfunction. So we said about heart attack and stroke already, but kidney dysfunction is wow. Now, let's dial into these classifications. So, blood pressure itself, the normal blood pressure, the rule of thumb is that ideally the normal level is 120 to 140, over 70 to 90, then we're good to train with them. So the first thing to highlight on this is that your systolic is the pressure that happens in your arteries when your heart is at contracting phase. So when your heart is actually contracting, that's your systolic blood pressure. So it's going to always be a higher number than your diastole. Then your diastole is when the heart is in the relaxing phase. So it's always going to be lower than the systole. Now, we want to make sure that the blood pressure measurement is taken at rest, because even just moving is going to take definitely our systole up and might have a slight increase in our diastole just from moving. But what we're looking for is when we take this blood pressure of our clients at the beginning of a session or beginning of their consultation, we're looking for them to have a normal blood pressure reading. Now, optimal is 120 over 80, but like I said, that can, us as level 3 PTs, for example, if you're doing this as part of your exercise referral, you have slightly different boundaries. You can work with people at a higher level. However, your your boundaries to work on is 120 to 140 over 70 to 90. But we need to know some serious breakdown of specific levels on here. So the actual classifications. And the reason why we need to know that for this is because this is the type of question that comes up in the exam. So, first of all, we've got hypotension, which means low blood sugar level. No, it doesn't. Low blood pressure. So hypotension. So systole is going to be less than 90 and diastole is 60. Then for normal, we've said about. Then pre-hypertension. So this is if somebody has a systole ranging between 120 and 140, and then a diastole between 80 and 90. So that kind of means they're at the top end of normal, they're pre-hypertensive. They're almost got high blood pressure. Now notice that the systole is going to go up in brackets of 20. So then we've got stage 1 hypertension is 140 to 160. Now in that place, that stage 1 hypertension, that's a place whereby they are classed as having hypertension, but it's not as severe as stage 2. So it's the first level, stage 1, of having high blood pressure. So it's literally the first 20 brackets of being in the high blood pressure mode. And then for the diastole, it's the first 10 brackets. So that's 90 to 99. Then stage 2 goes up again. So this is 160. Actually, it's to 180. So 160 to 180 over 100 to 110. So that leaves us with stage 2 hypertension. Now these guys are still okay to train with an exercise referral instructor or under close clinical supervision, but if it's over 180 over 110, that's the point whereby it's classed as severe hypertension. And at that point, they cannot train, whether that's doing it on their own or with a specialist clinical supervision. Too dangerous for them to train. So the reason why we need to know this when working with our clients is that we need to know that we're working with the people that are safe to train. Now, if we train somebody that's got really high blood pressure, we're instantly at a point whereby we're putting them at risk of a heart attack. Think about what's happening in those arteries. If we now add to the demand of the heart on top of somebody that's got that kind of stressor, got all that gunk in their arteries, we're more likely to cause a clot either in the heart or in the brain. And obviously that's not something that we want. So we want, for the health of our client, we want to just be working with those that are in a stable, normal environment. Now, all we need to know is that stage 1 hypertension is 140 to 159 over 90 to 99. Stage 2 is 160 to 180 over 100 to 110. And then severe, which isn't actually on this table, is 180 over 110. Now, if it's over that point, they can't train at all. So that's all about classifications in relation to hypertension, and it does come up quite often. But let's have a look at what increases the blood pressure, why people have higher blood pressure than other people, and why some people that do have high blood pressure get an increase in blood pressure from doing specific things. So let's look at the long term to start off with. Somebody that might have had normal blood pressure when they were younger is more likely to then have high blood pressure when they're older if they have these things going on. So if they have some family history of blood pressure, based on their lifestyle, their smoking, their environment, age, so age will be a factor. Physical inactivity is the biggie, and that's based on how we manage cholesterol in our body, and that cholesterol is what's then going to cause the plaques. High levels of saturated fats and cholesterol, again, that relates to the plaques that build up in the arteries and cause atherosclerosis. Hypertension, type 2 diabetes, they're more likely to have high blood pressure. Then you've got obesity and overweight, high blood cholesterol, blood lipid profile, again, that's to do with the plaques. Stress, because that increases the heart rate and the demand on the body, that's going to increase blood pressure. And also certain medications, in particular hormone replacement therapy, will increase blood pressure in the long term. Quite a list. Now, there are also a few things, a few exercises, a few things that we do that can increase blood pressure straight then and there as we do it. And that's why when we take our blood pressure reading to compare it to norms, we must do it when we're resting, totally rested. So if we do any of these things, and that will increase our blood pressure short term. So isometric contractions are the biggest one for this. That's when you literally are holding a muscle at the same length. So for example, if you take a little bicep curl motion now, but stop it at a particular range and just hold that contraction, really feel and squeeze, you're holding an isometric contraction. A plank is an isometric contraction. An iso squat is an isometric contraction. Now, just by holding this isometric contraction, you're going to increase blood pressure quite significantly. Also, if you do really high resistance work, you remember when you kind of get to that last few reps of your high resistance, you really feel that burn. That's the point whereby you really squeeze and you push forwards. That's the point whereby you're working to a point where we class it as Valsalva effect, because you're holding your breath to squeeze out those last few reps. And that absolute impact, that really high resistance right at the end point, is a real substantial point whereby you increase your blood pressure. And you might know this by things called like squatter's nosebleed, for example. And that's whereby you get a nosebleed if you're squatting really, really heavy, as a result of just the increased pressure around the brain in particular, but increased pressure on the arteries. Also, alongside that Valsalva effect I mentioned, which is whenever you hold your breath and force outwards. So the way to kind of understand Valsalva is if you aim to close your nose and your mouth, but aim to still try and breathe out. Now, don't do that for very long. I don't want you increasing your blood pressure on me. But it's that feeling of pushing, like trying to breathe out, but having a closed nose and mouth. So I'm sure you're making funny faces right now whilst you're listening to this, trying to do it. Fantastic. I wish I could see you. So and that is Valsalva effect, and that will massively increase blood pressure, and that's why we don't go for isometric contractions, high resistance, or for anything that holds the breath. The other things that will also raise blood pressure is really high heart rate, so like high intensity interval training, definitely going to increase blood pressure because of the demand on the heart, and also if the arms are overhead for a long period of time or for a very heavy period of time. So that's our short-term things that will increase the blood pressure as well. Now, let's see how this is kind of processing with you guys. I hope you're all still with me. We're going to use this information now that we've got to answer 2 multiple choice questions. Now, when I bring them up on screen, I would like you to take your time at answering them, really read the question, and then if you're listening live, I'd like you to pop in the comments box what your answer is. If you're listening to the recording, then please do pause the video, take your time to go through the answer and write it down, and then obviously you'll have the answer when we come back on screen. So for those of you listening live, are you ready? Quiz. So what I'd like you to do is in the comments box just write the number and followed by the letter that you think the answer is. Let's go for number 1 to start off with. What is the blood pressure threshold that contraindicates exercise even under medical supervision? So is it A, 120/80, B, 140/90, C, 160/100, or D, 180/110? Make sure you really break down that question. Make sure you find out what it's really asking and then pop in a little guess for your answer. Make sure you write it down as well. And then when you're ready, you can move on to question 2. Question 2 is, which of the following will significantly increase systolic and diastolic blood pressure? Isometric contractions, walking, swimming, or circuit weight training? So answer those 2. I'll give you literally a minute. If you've got any other questions about this blood pressure, then pop that across. And see if you're getting this beautifully. I can see all of you are getting these answers in. I've got a couple of answers which are looking fantastic. Fab. There, we're getting a few through. Lovely. Okay, keep going with those answers. Just one little technical thing to bring through. Yes, you guys are all muted. The way to answer is just to pop a little comment in the comments box, as we end up with lots of reverb going on if we have lots of people with their sound on. So make sure that you pop a little comment in the comments box. Great. Okay, good. We've got lots of answers. So let's go through these. So question 1. What is the blood pressure threshold that contraindicates exercise even under medical supervision? So this is the one that is so high that even if they were under clinical supervision, they wouldn't be able to do any exercise, okay? So contraindicates means cannot do exercise, okay? So the answer to this one is D, 180/110. So this means that they are at a point whereby even under medical supervision, it's too high to exercise. Lots of you got that right, well done. Then 2 is, which of the following will significantly increase systolic and diastolic blood pressure? This one is isometric contractions. I think you've all got that one right from what I can see. So 2A. So 1D, 2A. Now, the reason why it's not the others on 2 is, as you break it down, you can see that those things would actually be quite beneficial to a client, even if they have slightly raised blood pressure, because it's going to help increase a low level, so moderate activity, without any major sort of short-term increases in blood pressure. So that's where we are sitting for those 2 answers. Fantastic. I appreciate this one goes into quite a lot of detail, and if you guys kind of like this kind of sciencey detail as well in relation to blood pressure and understanding what's actually going on, then regardless of sort of where you are with your PT level or wherever you are with your level 3 exam, definitely check out exercise referral, because you go into these kind of conditions in huge detail about what you can and cannot offer these conditions. All right, let's skip on over. So planes and axis of movement. I'm guessing you guys are ready to rock and roll this. So planes and axis of movement is probably the one that I get asked the most questions about regularly. So let's go straight into this one. Planes of movement is like basically all the movements that we do work on 3 planes of movement. And you came across planes of movement probably at level 2, but it's about now making sure that we understand those and that we can then apply them to something called an axis. Now, an axis of movement, or an axis of movement, is basically the point, the axis, the pivot point that all of that movement in that plane moves from. Now, people often get really confused between the actual planes of movement, so sagittal, frontal, and transverse, and then the axis that is moving on, just based purely on the fact that it sometimes doesn't seem very logical. But we've just got to understand what's actually happening, and we sometimes just need to think about it a little bit more in relation to what's actually happening and really break it down. So I'm going to give you a bit of a system to breaking down what's going on, and then hopefully that'll help you understand and relate that to axis that's happening in the body. I will be honest, this is probably the bit that most people get stuck on. It's still the question that when it comes up in an exam and I'm scanning through it, I go, oh man. So don't feel bad about not necessarily understanding this really naturally straight away. It takes a little bit of work on, but that's why I really wanted to include this as one of your 4 golden nuggets today. So let's start off with sagittal plane. So we know there are 3 anatomical planes of movement. One is sagittal, one is frontal, one is transverse. Let's start with sagittal. A sagittal movement basically is a plane that divides the body from left to right. Now, as it's dividing the body between left to right, if you imagine there's this glass plane running all the way down through the middle of your body, that's dividing your left and right. Now, any movement must happen along that plane, which means that you're basically doing things like flexion, extension, you're moving forwards in space or backwards in space. So it's flexion and extension, and you're working in this kind of wheel motion forwards. That's exercises like squatting, lunging, and walking. Now, most of these exercises, or all of these exercises, you would view better from the side. So sagittal equals side. So if you, both of those start with an S, by the way, in case you need clarification. So literally, when you're looking from the side at somebody doing a squat, that's probably the place you would go to be able to see the most amount of movement happening. Kind of understood? If you were looking at walking, yes, you can see a lot from the back, but really when you look from the side, you can see the most amount of movement based on the joints that are moving and the action of that joint. When you look at somebody doing a lunge, you can see the most amount of movement happening. When you look at someone doing a bicep curl, you can see the most amount of movement happening when you go to the side. That's because it's all flexion and extension. So that's all sagittal. Anything that you would probably intuitively as an instructor go and stand to the side to be able to see the most amount of movement and check in on that plane, that's a sagittal plane. Now, this is where people generally get confused. So as we're looking at it from the side, we know that that joint is moving on through what we class as a medial lateral axis. Now, a medial lateral axis is basically, imagine a stick. So as you're looking at somebody do a lunge from the side of you, so you're looking at the side of them, imagine you now have a stick and you're literally going to, like, not too gruesome, but you're literally going to slide it all the way through them from their right hand side all the way through to their left hand side. So as they're moving on from that joint, it's moving and rotating around that axis you've just put through them. So the axis goes from right to left, even though the plane divides their left from their right. So when they're doing their lunges and their squats, it's in the sagittal plane, but the axis that the joints move around is the medial lateral axis. Medial means on the inside, lateral means on the outside. So if you think about, say, for example, lateral raise is on the outside, the lateral edge of your body. You've got the medial edge and the lateral edge. I hope you're all still following me. So sagittal plane means that you would mostly view from the side, and then that relates to the medial lateral axis. Great, okay, let's apply that same thought process as we go across to frontal. Now, frontal plane divides the body from front to back. So imagine you have a pane of glass, basically in between both ears, running all the way down both shoulders, both hips, just like in the picture you can see on the left. Now that divides your front from your back. Now front, another name for front is anterior. Think about having antennae at the front. And posterior, which means it's in the past, so it's behind you. So you're dividing your front from your back, which helps to understand the frontal. Now with this one, these are exercises like shoulder press, the lateral raise, or hip adduction. Now if you do these exercises with me, start moving around next to your laptop, basically from here, this exercise, you would mostly see most movement if you looked at it from the front or from the back. But frontal, you'd mostly look at movement that happens from the front. So most amount of movement's going on, and you can see that from the front of the body. Now I think this one's a much easier axis to understand as being a split from anterior to posterior, because that's exactly what the frontal plane does. It divides the front from the back. So as you're moving on that plane, dividing front and back, your anterior posterior axis is the one that is moving. So for this one, imagine you're standing right round at the front of your client watching them do a shoulder press. In order to sort of say where that movement is coming from and twisting around, this is as if you've got a stick and you're standing in front of them and you put it straight through their belly button. So as you're putting that stick all the way through, you're moving from their anterior to their posterior. Fab. Okay, cool. So from that place, you've created an anterior-posterior axis, and then if you were to twist that stick forward and backwards, it's basically moving, and that's what would cause that up and down of your shoulder press, for example. It's that movement of the body. So now let's move on to transverse. Transverse divides the body into upper and lower levels. So it includes exercises like twists, spine rotations, and also chest fly. Now the way to remember this one is that you view most of the movement happening from the top of the body. So let's take a twist, for example. So if you just stand in your 5 pillars, nice straight and tall, and you take a spinal twist like you'd probably do as part of a warm-up or a mobility section, where you literally rotate the spine around, then in order to see the most amount of movement, I'd have to be taking like a bird's eye view and viewing you from the top. Now, as I rotate that around, I can view you from the top. Now, from that top position is also the place where I'd want to see from a chest fly. So, imagine you've got your client laying down on the bench and they're doing a chest fly. Where would you see the most amount of movement? You'd have to move level with their head, wouldn't you? So you'd have to actually drop down to your knees and look level as if you're looking right down through the middle of their skull as they're moving their arms up and down in a fly motion. So that is where you'd see the most amount of movement. Now this is if you stay in that position, so you're above their head, and you were to put that stick that we were saying about through the top of the head down out through the feet, then literally that's your longitudinal axis. It goes through the length of the body. So the way that I would work this out, if I was given an exercise and had to work out what axis it moved around, this is how I'd work it out. I'd take the exercise. So for example, if someone told me it was a bicep curl, I'd take the exercise and I'd go, okay, what plane of movement does this work in? I.e., where do I see the most amount of movement from? Okay, I see the most amount of movement from the side, so it must be sagittal. So then imagine yourself standing at the side of that client and then putting that stick through the joint that's moving all the way through from the side position, and then you know that stick is going through a medial lateral, and that stick is your axis, medial lateral axis. So that's how I'd break it down. The other way of doing it, so let's have another example. Let's say got all the best examples, a lat pull down. So we're going for a lat pull down kind of motion. Now, if I had someone doing a lat pull down, would I want to stand front or back, wouldn't I? So in order to see the most amount of movement. So we go to the front, and then literally from there, I'd stick the stick through them, which would from the front to the back, and that gives me my anterior posterior axis. So really it's quite wordy, but as soon as you can break down what medial and lateral means. Remember, they mean medial is on the inside edge, closest to the center of the body. Lateral is on the outside, so you're talking about sides. Anterior and posterior, you're talking about front and back. Longitudinal, we're talking about the length of the body, so through the top of the skull and out through the feet. Should we see how much that made sense to all of you? So for a quiz, those of you listening live, hit up on the quiz now. So we've got, just pop in the number 3 and then your answer. A calf raise exercise involves movement mostly in which axis of the body? So think about where you would see the most amount of movement. Would you need to stand from the side, the front, or see them from the top? And then from that position, if you stuck a stick through the joint moving, would that be a medial, lateral, anterior, posterior, longitudinal, or coronal? Oh, we got lots of answers coming in. Okay, some different answers coming in. Keep them going, guys. Keep those answers coming in. If you're listening to the recording, then make sure you still do these quizzes because it will really help you. Okay, let's do this. So a calf raise, let's all do a calf raise right now. So your feet are on the floor, you're literally going to lift your heels up. Where do I see the most amount of movement? It's not from the top, and it's not from the front. I don't see much movement from there. If I go to the side, I can see the angles move. I can see a lot more movement. So we know it's sagittal also because it's plantar flexion, and flexion is always in the sagittal plane. So we know it's sagittal. Now, if I'm in the sagittal, I have to view it from the side, which means it's medial lateral. So the answer is B, medial lateral for a calf raise. That's a tricky one, isn't it? You can see why even on an exam when I see these questions, I go, ah, it's about breaking it down. So if you guys can really kind of understand that, it's all about how do you break down the question and apply your strategy that you have to be able to answer it in the way you know. A couple people asking what's coronal. Coronal is actually not any of these. It's not an axis of movement. Some people class it as a plane of movement, but we don't use it as a plane of movement. We don't use it as an axis. It's literally just a red herring thrown in there for fun. Okay, so the answer is medial lateral. Let's move on. Golden nugget number 3. This one is all about joint and muscle action. Can I just say, by the way, guys, you are really playing full out. Lots and lots of information going on, and really impressed. So keep your attention nice and alive. Have another gulp of coffee if you need to, and we're moving on to joint and muscle actions. This is mostly in relation to concentric and eccentric actions, so that we can kind of really understand the in-depths of this. Now, we know that a lot of people struggle in particular with joint actions and also with muscle locations and sort of the origins and insertions of muscles. They're probably the biggest questions, but you know what? We would be here forever if I'd done muscle insertions and origins with you. So, because there's a lot of muscles in the body. So instead, that is part of what makes up the Revision Mastery series. It's one of the modules that goes into huge detail about where each muscle in the body originates and inserts. And it's done on a similar format to me here talking to you through with these PowerPoint presentations, so you can see everything in front of you whilst I talk you through everything. So it's a really fantastic way to learn. But as we kind of move forwards now, we're going to pop that in relation to joint and muscle action. So it presumes that you understand where most muscles are in the body as we move forward. So let's look at types of contraction. The types of contraction we have in the body, we've already spoken about something called isometric contraction, and that means iso meaning same, and then metric meaning length. Isometric means that you're keeping the contraction the same length in that muscle. Now, we want to introduce about concentric and eccentric. Now, really, this should kind of be sort of fundamentals from level 2. But I understand, I totally appreciate that not everybody has all of this foundation when it comes through. And I see this especially when we hit doing training systems. So you might have done things like eccentric tempo or negative training systems, whereby you really need to understand which is concentric, which is eccentric, so you can change the variables between the two. And people just get flummoxed, totally flummoxed when they get to their assessment or when they're going through the practical side of it. So it's about understanding what phase of an action, of an exercise, is causing concentric contraction and what phase is an eccentric contraction. So let's have a look at these two. So concentric, remember it starts with a C, is the muscle contraction whereby the muscle is basically coiling up. It's getting shorter. So I'm using alliteration here to help you remember it as much as possible. So concentric starts with a C and the muscle is coiling up. The muscle that is the prime mover is starting to get shorter. Then the weight is going towards the clouds. Always the way. Never an exception at all. Even if you're using a machine that alters that via pulley system, look at the weight stack. Does it go towards the clouds or does it go towards the earth? That's what we need to decipher. So concentric is when the muscle is coiling up, i.e. getting shorter, and that the weight goes towards the clouds. So let's take the upright row that you can see in this image. First of all, you go prime mover. Okay, prime mover is going to be the traps. So as I contract and I do this upright row motion, you can join in if you want to, the muscle that I'm talking about, that prime mover, gets shorter. It coils up. And as it coils up, I'm lifting the actual weight towards the clouds. Fab. Now, that same muscle is what we're talking about when I start to lower that weight down. I'm not talking about a different muscle. I stay talking about the prime mover. Now, think about the eccentric is the muscle contraction whereby the muscle is elongating. So the muscle is still contracted. That traps in the upright row in that high position, just like the guy's doing on screen now. In that place, your muscle is still contracted and it's going to gradually elongate. And so it's getting longer. So your muscle actually gets longer even though it's still contracted. And it's kind of like easing out a reverse tug of war, like really gradually. And then the weight is going down towards the earth. So you end up with a really clear way of knowing, am I working on concentric or am I working on eccentric? So let's have a couple of examples. Bicep curl, easy one. You go prime mover is the bicep, must be, okay? Now if I coil that up so that my bicep gets shorter and the weight goes towards the clouds, then I know that that's the concentric phase. Let's take a leg press. Say I want to find the eccentric phase of a leg press. Now, I'm sat on my leg press and my legs are all set up and I literally push the weight away. As I push the pad away, I literally see that the weight stack starts to lift. So that must be my concentric phase. And then as I bring the weight pad back in, then I see that the weight stack goes down towards the earth. And my glutes, my quads, my hamstrings start to get longer. So in that space, that's getting longer. Now, in particular, glutes and quads. Think glutes and quads on that leg press. Hamstrings can confuse matters because they move at two joints. So just think glutes and quads. So muscle contraction for eccentric is going to be as the knees start to bend. Same as with a squat. Eccentric, your whole body weight goes down towards the earth. So that's you lowering down. Concentric is when you lift your body weight up towards the clouds. Fab. Let's see how we get on with this quiz. So 2 questions for you to get stuck into on this one. I couldn't resist but to give you 2. So those of you listening live, get onto the chat box. What is the primary concentric action of a gluteus maximus? Is it hip extension, hip flexion, knee flexion, or knee extension? And then when you're ready, number 5 as well, what movement causes the latissimus dorsi to contract eccentrically? Shoulder adduction, shoulder abduction, shoulder elevation, or elbow flexion? And all you've got to do is literally pop your answers into the comment box. Oh, you guys are a little bit slower on this one. Have a good think and then pop it in. Here we go. Here come some of the answers. Fantastic. Good. Keep those answers coming in for both question 4 and question 5. Awesome answers. Okay, you ready for ready for finding out what the actual answer is? So, question 4, what is the primary concentric? So we know it's got to get shorter. So we know that we're asking when the glutes coil up, when the glutes get shorter, what is the action that happens? And the answer is hip flexion. Sorry, hip extension. Oh, that was quick. Hip extension. So you're literally extending the hip 4A, so that the concentric action of the glutes is hip extension. And the eccentric of it would be hip flexion. Okay, what movement causes the latissimus dorsi to contract eccentrically? So talking about the main movement for a lat. So first of all, if we were to contract the lats, let's break it down. If we were to contract the lats and make them shorter, what action would have to happen? I'd have to bring my arm right down next to my side, like at the finishing point of a lat pull down, whereby your elbows are almost touching your ribs. And that is shoulder adduction. But we're after the eccentric. So this is the point. So contracting eccentrically, now I want my lats to get longer and elongate. So I'm having shoulder abduction. So the answer to question 5 is B. So you got 4A and 5B. So I hope you guys did well. Those of you listening along, hope that you've got lots of answers. Looks like everybody's done pretty well on here. Great, good stuff. A couple of little things in there whereby people are maybe picking up a different level. I just want to kind of explain about elevation on here on question 5. Elevation is just the shoulder girdle. That's your actual, instead of coming from the shoulder joint, it's the motion of the shoulder blades elevating up and back down. So that's not actually a movement of the lat that we would talk about. It's actually talking lats are responsible for shoulder abduction. So adduction and abduction. Hope that clears that one up a little bit. Good stuff. Right, are you ready for your final nugget of information? You guys are going strong. Really, really impressed the whole way through. Now, energy systems is part that definitely is covered on your exam. There's usually a couple of questions at least, and usually it's the very last chunk of your exam, just as you're starting to tire out. And then they pop in a question about adenosine triphosphate, and you're like, oh man, where am I? So it's good to make sure you kind of got this one chucked in there. And generally, when I explain this to the group, they're always saying how much that benefited and actually helped a lot in comparison to trying to read it from the book. So I just want to give you a bit of an intro into what ATP actually is. If you don't understand what ATP is, then understanding energy systems in general is going to be quite challenging, because you're going to be at a point whereby you're just not sure why we need 3 different energy systems. So we need to understand what ATP actually is. Now, ATP is actually adenosine triphosphate, and it's the currency of energy in the body. So if we want to create muscle contractions, we need adenosine triphosphate, and it literally is made in 3 different ways, but it sits on the myosin heads. Now, if you remember back to your breakdown of your muscle structure, you've got actin and myosin, which are the tiny little myofilaments. Now, as these two meet, they have ATP sitting on those golf club heads of the myosin. So this ATP just sits on there, and that allows it to get stuck, or allows that contraction to happen against the actin. So actin and myosin won't link together without there being ATP, which is why we can't have contraction of the muscle unless we have ATP. Now, because we have adapted over millions of years, it's basically a point whereby we have created several ways that we can create ATP in our body. If we just had one way that we could create ATP in our body, for example aerobic, as soon as oxygen was no longer available to us, we'd be screwed. We'd have to stop moving. We'd not be able to create exercise, and we'd literally be paralyzed from there. It would have to be to a point that we wouldn't be able to move quickly for things, because we could only do stuff really, really slowly. And we don't have any other adaptations in our body that counter that, whereas other animals I'm sure do. But we're at a point whereby we make energy in 3 different ways, and the energy we make is ATP. Adenosine triphosphate is made in 3 different ways in our body. And let's go through and have a little look at what's actually happening in relation to ATP. So you start off with ATP, and then this adenosine triphosphate, so that is 1 adenosine molecule and 3 phosphate molecules. So this ATP sits on the myosin's head, on the head of the myosin, and then as a P is broken off of it, literally broken away, that's the spark that causes the energy. So as that P gets broken off from the chain, energy is created. So we need to make sure we create lots of ATP in our body. The more ATP we create that sits on these little myosin heads, the more energy we can create in the body, because we can just break off P's left, right and centre and get lots of little sparks of energy that make us feel great and make us allow us to move or have connections happen in the body. Now, the way that we create ATP in the first place, so that then we can turn it into ADP, which is breaking off the P, then we have the 3 different systems. The phosphocreatine, or the creatine phosphate, regardless of what way around you call it, it is the same thing. And this is totally anaerobic. It's about maximal effort, like sprinting, anything for less than 10 seconds, and it's really limited production of ATP. It can't last very long. Bless it. It literally creates it really quickly, like it's created in like an instant, but it doesn't last very long because it doesn't create much ATP. This is like our first gear on a car. It pulls us away, but you can't stay there for very long. So that's our creatine phosphate or phosphocreatine system. Then the second one that we've got is a lactic acid or lactate system, and this is also anaerobic. However, it's high intensity, but a little bit less than what we had for phosphocreatine. So we're talking the kind of 80% max heart rate up to about 90%. It's about a 400-meter run would be included as one of these activities. It's approximately 10 to 90 seconds of work. Some researchers said it's more like 20 to 90, but if you think about it in relation to 10 to 90 seconds, the most time that you can spend in this energy system is 3 minutes. The absolute most, and that's a very trained individual. So then this creates some ATP, more than with creatine phosphate, but a lot less than when we get onto the third version. And this is limited production of ATP. So it'll work for a little while, and then we need to stop and create some more. But the problem with this system is that it creates some waste products which accumulate to the point we go, I cannot withstand this any longer. And that's why we are limited for how long we can stay in a lactate system before we have to shift to a different energy system or change our environment, change the stressor we're putting on the body. So then we've got aerobic system. This is the one we'll spend most of our time in. It's where you and I are right now, unless you're running listening to this. Then literally you're at a point where you're staying aerobic, you're not going anaerobic. So it's working under the 80% max heart rate, under that anaerobic threshold, staying in a moderate intensity. Running, walking, sitting, moving in general life is all aerobic. It's a long duration, so it's usually for 3 minutes or more. and you can create unlimited amounts of ATP as long as you have the fuel to go in, which is obviously oxygen and glucose and some fats and proteins as well. Then in that place, as long as we have all that fuel going in, we're okay. We can keep aerobic for as long as possible. So, and obviously assuming that we're not at a point whereby we're not getting so out of breath that we are not able to get in enough oxygen, that's when we turn anaerobic. So then we got fourth, this is kind of like our cruise, our fourth, fifth or sixth gear. We could stay here all day long as we had the fuel to do so. Then it works 90% of the time. So it's the one we're mostly in for most of the time. Now these three energy systems, when they are happening, we are using all of our three energy systems all the time, but we focus our attention towards using one of them more than another to create the ATP that we need. So for example, you have Aunt Mabel in her kitchen and a can of beans fall off the shelf. She has to move quickly to be able to catch that can of beans. She's not going to wait to create enough aerobic energy to do that. She needs CP ATP straight away. So from the CP system, the creatine phosphate system. So she will be responding with creatine phosphate. And then after that, she kind of like, oh, that was fine. And then she starts to continue back into her aerobic system, which is keeping her standing, moving around the kitchen, doing what she needs to do. So we have this mixture of different demands that are needed based on the environment we're in and the demands that's happening on our body. So we have these three different energy systems that are needed to create that. Oh, quiz time already. That was nice and quick. So which of the following is not a method for making adenosine triphosphate? There's your proper spelling of adenosine triphosphate. It's lactate acid system, aerobic system, superset system, or creatine phosphate system. I always find these hard to keep a poker face on my voice when I'm going through these. Hoping you can all hear me okay. Fantastic. Good. Keep those answers coming in. Lovely. This one's a bit easier, isn't it? So the key to this one is the question. Now the question is only asking you for one correct answer, and it may sound silly, but I've had people in exams before literally sit there and tick more than one answer because they've not read the question properly. So which of the following is not a method for making adenosine triphosphate? Now in here, your answer should be C. So your answer should be C. All the others are what we've mentioned. So lactate, aerobic, and creatine phosphate. We've said create ATP in our body so we can use it as energy. However, a superset system is not either of those. That's literally a resistance training system. So that one's definitely a red herring in there for you. And you all got that right. Love that. Fantastic. Love seeing all those C's in the chat box there. Fab. So that brings us to the end of our 4 nuggets that we've gone through. So in these 4 nuggets, we've literally covered loads. We've kind of covered across blood pressure classifications. We covered planes of movement and axis. We covered about concentric and eccentric, and now about ATP as well. Now, all of this kind of content, like I said at the beginning, is just 4 nuggets that kind of broke down from the 7 modules. And this probably has highlighted for you that there's probably a couple of areas that maybe you don't know as much about, and then some areas that you feel really confident about. So I just want to take a moment to tell you about our revision mastery series that we do. Those of you that are learners with us, you already have this wonderful tool. So yes, you're already there with that one. Those of you that are not currently with us for the Revision Mastery series, it is literally like what we've done here today, but you get literally all 7 modules so that you can dip in and out of all 7 modules and you can understand each part in full detail, whereas we've just gone for like nuggets, just straight in. And each of these 7 modules is about an hour, some a little bit less, some a little bit more, which means that you kind of have this whole kind of plexus of information that sets you up to understand the real basics and the more in-depth stuff. And literally it's designed to help you pass your level 3 A&P exam first time. That's what it's designed for. Now, we usually sell this at £97, but as you guys are here live on a bank holiday Monday morning, those of you that wanted this, then you can literally get it for £37, and that's on today only, because tomorrow after midnight it's going to be going up in price. It's no longer going to be at that 37. So what I was going to do is just show you where this, I'll pop this little link in the chat box so that you can see it for those of you that are interested. Now, this link I'll pop in, and the screen that you'll get up, I'll just show you through. So that's in the chat box for you now, so you can go along. Now, literally on this screen, you'll notice that when you get here, you've got an option of level 2 and level 3. So I know a few of you on the call are at level 2, but today you just click this box instead. So then you go across to the level 3, and you'll be brought to a page which tells you all about everything that gets covered on that revision mastery series for your level 3. And then once you decide, okay, that's what I wanted to go for, you literally just click that link. It will take you straight through to a PayPal for that 37. So really nice and straightforward if that's where you're deciding to go in relation to progressing your revision onto the next level. Now, I've popped that link into the chat box as well so that you have that available to you. Now, I know there's a few questions coming in now, some in relation to anatomy and physiology. I've not had too many in relation to anatomy and physiology, so I'm guessing there is, I've answered a lot of the questions you have, but I'm now going to go through and do some questions for you. So some of those I know will be about A&P content. Happy to go through those. Other questions that I know are already coming in are questions in relation to how this revision mastery series actually works, and just understanding a little bit more about it. So let's start working our way through some of these questions. One coming through basically saying about this revision mastery, can you download it onto your phone? Yes, you can. So it is an online web portal whereby you've literally on that web page you've got access to all of your units straight in front of you. And then if you want a specific program, if you don't already have access to it, I can literally send you an email which has a link on there that will allow you to be able to download that to MP3 or to MP4, and then you can literally pop it on your phone. In fact, a few of the guys listening now that are on our current level 3 have already got that and downloading it on their phones already, and having a fantastic ability to be able to use it whilst they're out and about. So that's things like if you do a lot of running, if you go out running, if you are walking, if you're walking the dog, if you're tidying and cleaning in the kitchen or whatever it might be, it's just a way of being able to fit your revision in around your life rather than having to feel like you've got to be sat at a laptop or a desktop, which I know for fit pros sometimes that's a little bit harder to do because you like to be moving. So yes, you definitely can. Yes is the answer. You can download it to your phone, and I can send you across, if you decide to go for this today, I can send you across that on your email. That's fine. Those of you that have any specific A&P type questions, please make sure you pop those in the chat box too, because I would love to be able to answer those for you here today. So if you've had any questions you've come across when you've been doing your revision or your reading, then pop them in and I will answer those as well. Another question coming through about whether this revision mastery is appropriate for CYQ. Yes, it is. We base it on active IQ, but it's the exact same syllabus as for CYQ. So, yep, definitely appropriate. Perfect. And then somebody asked about level 2. So, in relation to level 2, yes, when you follow this link, you will see the level 2 option as well as the level 3. Just pick the one that's most appropriate for you and where you're at. Fantastic. If you're at level 2, this workshop was probably quite intense for you. We went through some quite advanced structures to help you on your exam. And then in relation to test questions, yep, so there are little test questions alongside this on your revision mastery as well, whereby you go through some little mock questions, and I can also send you 101 mock questions if you've not already got that one. Fab. Okay, Liz has sent through a great question in relation to her A&P. Is this an A&P question? Let me have a little check through. Okay, there's not an A&P question, that's fine. That's about your practical assessment, and yes, you can do that. Yeah, that's fine. And I'll send you an email in particular about that, that's fine. Okay, any other questions in relation to the content we covered today, the actual specific content that we covered today, rather than and about A&P in general? So I'm here, I'm able to sort of answer all of your questions in about that. One comment's come through from the guys that are part of that actually have access to this same revision mastery, saying how awesome it's been at helping them pass first time, or hopefully about to pass first time in their exam in 2 weeks' time. So yeah, really great to hear that from you guys. Thank you. And in fact, I had an email this morning from a lovely lady that used this and actually got 90% on her first time through using her A&P. We get emails like this all the way through. Really, really useful. So I'm glad it's beneficial to you all. So those of you that are listening live today, you'll get a copy of this same webinar sent through to you on email. So you'll get a recording, and that means you can access it. So everybody registered for this will get a recording through. So that's absolutely fine. Yep. So if there are no more questions in relation to your anatomy and physiology, or relation to that revision mastery series that we spoke about, then please do pop a little comment in, say what your biggest takeaway has been so far today. So what has been your biggest takeaway throughout the whole webinar, whole workshop today? What's the biggest thing that you've done that you've learnt about that has really benefited you today? Carly, yes, it does have mock questions per each module on that revision mastery. Yes, definitely. So there are mock questions and a little cheat sheet that happens on each of the modules. So for each of the modules, yes, you get a couple of little mock questions in there. So please make sure you check that out. And the little cheat sheets. Also, if you need mock papers, I can send you 101 mock questions. I'm guessing you're working towards your level 3, Carly. Lovely. Fantastic. Lovely. Yeah, really important to have a little go at answering those questions. And a few people have written in there that actually it's been really beneficial to go through the mock questions, but also have somebody to then talk through the answer and then sort of break down the question. So I'm glad that's been beneficial for you guys today. Carly, I can give you that link now. If you don't have the 101 mock questions, I can actually give you that link right now in the chat box. So bear with me a moment. Fantastic. There you go. So that one's in your chat box for you, Carly. Now, actually, what I will say about the mock questions, we found this before, is that if testing it is great, and you guys probably found throughout doing all this, is that testing each little section of your knowledge is fantastic. But sometimes it's best to kind of make sure that you've got that learning level as well. So doing the mock questions are fab to find out where your particular points are that you need to work on. But I would definitely recommend doing the mock questions at the end of where you've been able to learn and revise the best as possible, because in that place you're going to be able to access it strongest possible and keep your confidence up as well. Before, we've had it quite often that people go, oh, I've not really done much revision, but I'll go straight into my mock questions, and then they get to a point and they go, ah, that was a bit crazy or a little bit hard, and they lose all their confidence. So you've got the 101 mock question link. Literally, you can pop your email in and download those. But I will definitely recommend that if you're certainly at the point of needing to top up your learning in relation to preparing for your exam, then go down the route of that revision mastery, because it will certainly help you get all of your learning and knowledge in place in a way that kind of sticks in your head, so then when you come to do the mock papers and your real paper, that you're in a really strong, confident place to move forwards. So other biggest takeaways that are coming in from people is, a few of you have said the biggest takeaway was about the axis of movement. Definitely. It's certainly one that's a little bit awkward to understand from the book in particular, or how that would then relate to exercises. So the more of these you can go through, even if you get a friend of yours to literally stand there and give you questions about, if you do a shoulder press, what plane of movement is it, what axis is it, it'll help jog your memory, so that when you're kind of driving or walking or just chatting to someone, you're able to kind of keep playing through these questions. It's a big tip for you. So no other questions coming in. Does anybody else have any questions at all? Chris, glad the anatomical planes were beneficial. Lovely. So those of you that have no more questions for me, or any other question about A&P, then you are more than welcome to leave the webinar. It's been lovely to join you on this not so sunny bank holiday. So please do, you're welcome to disappear from here. If you could pop in anything that you found as your biggest takeaway, that would be fab as well. Any other questions, just pop them in. We'll stay on for another minute or so. If anybody else has any questions outside of this today, or don't want to put it in directly, then you can get a hold of me at info@parallel-coaching.com, and then I will be able to answer your question personally. So I hope you all have a lovely day ahead, and thank you for joining me for your revision session today. I look forward to hopefully seeing you through the revision mastery, seeing you on all future courses, and best of luck for your exam as well. Take care, guys.